I'm sorry that you and your family had to go through through this kind of challenge. And again, there are so many challenges in life that are inevitable, you know, by virtue of being born. And to add this challenge that is now caused by the war, it's just terrible and heartbreaking, and of course brings many of the questions about happiness to the fore. So I'm glad you brought it up, because there's really important work that you and others can do in this realm. So first of all, I do want to address the first part of your sharing, which is when people ask you, how can I be happy? And I would simply do two things here. I would first of all change the question. It's not how can I be happy, it's rather how can I be happier? Because remember, going back to what I talked about earlier, when we have the binary approach, either I'm unhappy or I'm happy, 0 or 1, bad or perfect, ego less or ego full, then I'm putting myself a bar that's impossible and unrealistic. Because again, I can't say about myself today after 30 years that I'm happy, because does that mean always happy? Does that mean fully happy? As I mentioned earlier, I can certainly say about myself that I'm happier. And it's the same with when you're dealing with you know, a very difficult and challenging reality, such as a war. Well, am I happy? No, but I can become happier. And that means I can do little things that may be helpful. And those little things can include talking about it with family members or friends. It can mean not giving up on exercise, physical exercise, because we know the connection between physical toughness and mental toughness. It means finding something to be grateful for. Maybe just the fact that I can hug my loved ones. Or that the end of the day has come and we're okay. Finding those little things to appreciate. Or maybe you know, going online and watching a video together with my family or friends that makes us smile. Again, going for the little things to become a little bit happier, not happy. So this would be my goal. Having said that, maybe we use another word. Maybe the word happy or happier or happiness triggers the wrong the wrong mindset given the situation. Maybe it's better to talk about feeling resilient or more resilient. Maybe it's better to talk about being, you know, less sad or less upset. So instead of using the word happy or happier or happiness, using a different word that will be less jarring, you know, less problematic in the context of a war. Just like a person who's depressed, I wouldn't say to him, here is how you can become happier. I would say, here is how you can better deal with your depression. Or here's what can help you feel a little bit stronger. So the words for different people. Again, if I'm feeling really down, yeah, I want to talk about happiness, but that's me. Very different from someone else who feels more comfortable talking about wellness or less depression or more resilient or more anti-fragile, whatever, you know, find the right words because they matter, obviously. So the two things, first of all, let's talk about being happier rather than happiness. And second, maybe not even use the word happiness or happier, but use different words. Now, to your second question, the permission to be human. I talk about it mostly in the context of painful emotions, but you're absolutely right. Permission to be human also applies to pleasurable emotions. In fact, I remember this when I was an undergraduate, so 30 years ago. This was a philosophy class, and I remember we were reading two different authors. We were reading John Rawls and Robert Nozick, and we were reading them to contrast their ideas about politics, because John Rawls is much closer to the socialist side. Robert Nozick is much closer to the capitalist side, and we were reading them both and talking about both. That sort of had a debate in class. And I remember one student who spoke much more about who was much pro-socialism, getting up and saying, and we started talking about happiness under socialism and under capitalism. And she said, I cannot be happy, because how can I be happy when I was raised in a family with money, and I have all my needs met, and there are people around the world who are poor, who were raised with nothing, who are struggling to get food on their table. And she said this, and she was talking about the privileged ones, we have no right to be happy. And for me, that captured an idea which, again, I don't know if it's a good description of it or not, but what came up to mind was, for me, this was the modern version of the original sin. The original sin is the idea that, you were born into sin, there's nothing you can do about it. And the idea, and again, this is, and the idea that she brought up is, I was born into sin. No matter what I do, I don't have a right to be happy because I was born with the privileges. And I have so many thoughts about it, and over the years I've thought, and I can still see her face, standing there with such passion, a young 21-year-old woman talking with such passion about this idea. And again, then I didn't have the tools to respond, at least not intelligently, about what she said. But I think today I can a little bit more. And here is what I have to say about it. First of all, when you put yourself down, when you do not give yourself the right to be happy, you're not helping people. In fact, you're hurting them. Why? Because people who increase levels of happiness are much more likely to act to help those people in need. So if I increase levels of well-being, I have more energy, more desire, much better ability to help those people who need help. Whether those people who need help in the Ukraine or in Russia, whether those people who need help who are living in poverty in my neighborhood or across the globe. I'm much more likely to act to help people when I'm in a better, because when I'm in a bad place, or a worse place, when I'm unhappy, I'm much less likely to have the energy and the desire and the ability to help. And this goes back to Barbara Fredrickson's work of broaden and build. When we increase levels of well-being, we're much more likely to see broadly, and we're in a much better place to build things. To see broadly, meaning to see others suffering. Because, when I'm suffering, I'm focusing on my suffering. How can I alleviate that? I'm much less likely to be focusing on others' suffering. So that's the first thing. We're not serving others when we're putting ourselves down. Second, just don't want to forget to talk about the third. The second thing that that's important to keep in mind is to be sensitive. Because if I'm in a good place and I'm feeling great and I'm talking to someone who's depressed, who's feeling down, the worst thing I can do for them, or among the worst things I can do for them, is come there with, positive energy and, oh, everything is well. And in a way saying, look at me, I'm happy. You can be happy too. No, we need to be very sensitive. We need to come to a place where they are. In other words, we need to have empathy. And empathy doesn't mean making us feel depressed, just like they are. It means understanding where they're coming from and what will really help them. And what will really help is not some, high positivity, very loud intervention. No, it means very soft, very gentle, very kind of embracing conversation. This is what great therapists do. This is what great friends do. They understand that when we are in need, they meet us where we are. Now, they may be in a very good place. They may be feeling emotional high, but they don't bring the manifestation of that high, the behavior of that high to our conversation. They meet us where we are, with compassion, with empathy, with softness, with gentleness. So that's very important to understand. The third thing, which actually should have been the second thing, is that emotions are the great equalizer. I remember, and I think I mentioned this in one of our webinars. One of my students, when I was still a graduate student, but he was an undergraduate then, was a second year, a sophomore in college, and he had just received his first B ever. In fact, it was a B+, but he had never known the letter B in his life. So in school, he was the valedictorian, meaning the top student in the school. He had straight A's. At Harvard for the first year and a half, first 3 semesters, he had straight A's, and suddenly he got a B+. And this guy was devastated. Now, it's very easy to look at him and say, come on, get real. Devastated from a B+, really? I'm striving for a B+. And just give me a B+. And you had straight A's your whole life. Now you got 1 B+. Come on, get a life. That is the wrong approach. We may feel that, we may want to say that, but that would be the wrong approach, because his experience of devastation is, and what I'm going to say now is going to sound very callous and insensitive, his feeling of devastation is as real as the devastation of a person who has just lost his livelihood, his job, who's devastated because he doesn't know whether he will be able to provide for his family. Now, objectively speaking, yeah, of course, it's very different. You'll get over this B+, and the guy who's just lost his job, he's in real trouble. Is he going to be able to support his family? So objectively, they're very different, but subjectively, emotionally, they're very similar. Why? Because the subjective is the objective. Subjective experiences are real. We can't argue with those. And this is why it's important to give people the permission to be human, because if I tell my child, after they have an argument with a friend at school, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. You shouldn't feel upset about it because this is trivial. Look at the real problems in the world. War, hunger. You're worried about a little argument with a friend? Come on, you shouldn't be upset. I'm actually negating their reality because their emotion is as real as the emotion of those who are struggling at war or who are struggling to bring food to their homes. because emotions are emotions are emotions. They're the great equalizer. So when we have no empathy for that rich person who's upset because they have it all, no, their emotion is real. The emotion is real. Emotions are the great equalizer. And we know, we see that emotions, painful emotions, do not skip the rich, the successful, the accomplished. They visit everyone. And very often we see it, that the person who objectively has it all, subjectively is experiencing more painful emotions than a person who has very little. And their pain and suffering is real. And our goal, our objective is once again to treat this with empathy. So just because, and I go back to that young woman who said, what right do we have to be happy? What I say to her is, first of all, you're not helping anyone by making yourself unhappy. You'll be able to help the world a lot more, those people in need a lot more, if you think about yourself as well, about your happiness and cultivate it, because then you're more likely to give, to help, to contribute. Second, just because you were born into a wealthy family doesn't mean you will be exempt from painful emotions, even if you do strive for happiness, meaning you don't need to help yourself become unhappy and suffer and struggle. You will suffer and struggle regardless, because emotions are the great equalizer. And it could be when you get a B+, and it could be when you lose someone dear to you, because, you know, money and success doesn't exempt us from the most devastating of losses in life. Or because your business will not do as well, or because someone will turn you down when you ask him for a date. You will experience devastation and hardships and difficulties. You don't need to go and look for it actively. You don't need to say, I was born into this reality and therefore I deserve to suffer more. Suffering will take care of itself. Don't worry. Whether you're rich, whether you're successful, whether you have the best luck in the world, suffering will find you, us. It always does. It's part of life. And what I'm saying to that 21-year-old woman who today is 50 years old, and what I'm saying to people who feel guilty, how can I be happy or happier? How can I be doing well when so many people are suffering? You're not helping anyone by suffering yourself. Give yourself the permission to experience joy with empathy, with gentleness when you help others. And then give yourself the permission to experience the suffering and pain when these come, because they do, because that's part of life as well, inevitably part of life. So the permission to be human, as Maria, as you so aptly pointed out, applies to both sides of the emotional spectrum. It applies to every emotion, from joy to pain, from happiness to suffering.